In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Memphian Tigers podcast. I am Greg Gaston alongside Frank Bonner, Daily Memphian Tigers football beat writer. Also, Tim Buckley joins us, the Daily Memphian deputy sports editor and senior writer. One programming note, Parth Upadhyay right now is he's suffering pain and inclement weather, I believe, in the beautiful Bahamas. No, he's actually with the Memphis Tigers men's basketball team as they begin the battle for Atlantis Wednesday at 4 o'clock against Michigan. So Parth on assignment. We won't talk to Parth, obviously, this week, but he will rejoin us next week for next week's Daily Memphian Tigers podcast. All right, guys, first of all, let's jump right into the big news today. It involves the University of Memphis and Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. Fred Smith and FedEx have stepped up once again as they have committed a $50 million challenge gift to the University of Memphis for renovations to Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. The school has also announced that they will match that as they will fundraise $50 million of their own. And then $120 million of the state allocated money that a Memphis City councilman has introduced a resolution about that will also go to this project. So you're looking at actually more than what they were really hoping for at the beginning. We're looking at a $220 million investment when everything's all said and done to renovate Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. Frank, it's much anticipated news. It's long awaited news. It is huge news.
Yeah, and I think when the news first came out that they were going to do renovations, one of my main questions was, are they going to have a lead gift? Is there going to be a lead donor? Because a lot of universities who have these big projects have a lead donor. And we hadn't heard one coming about until now with Fred Smith giving this $50 million. So I think that's key number one. And key number two, a part of this here deal is that the ownership from the city will now be moved to the university. And I think that's a big component because now the university doesn't have to go through a lot of red tape and getting approval with the city and all that stuff when they want to do whatever it is they want to do with the stadium. So now the stadium can now truly be the University of Memphis's own football stadium as opposed to it being the city and they just being some renters.
That is right. Tim, when in need, call FedEx. Fred Smith and company come through again.
Yeah, why doesn't UPS ever pony up some money in Memphis?
Check out some other cities.
It's huge.
Where they probably
I mean, it's absolutely huge. I mean, just think about all of it. My goodness, between the golf tournament and now this and all the other charitable stuff and everything. Look, we're not kissing up or anything here, but where would this city be without FedEx?
And now you're talking about, as Frank just alluded to, the school taking control of that stadium, meaning the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, meaning the Southern Heritage Classic, meaning the USFL showboats and other events, concerts, things of that nature that happen at that stadium will be under the auspices, the leadership of the University of Memphis, no longer the city. Frank?
Yeah, and I don't think as far as what fans and citizens in the city can expect, I don't think those three components are going to change in what they look like. I mean, I think the Liberty Bowl is still going to be the Liberty Bowl. The Heritage Classic is still going to be the Heritage Classic, and the USFL is still going to run how it's supposed to. And so the changing of ownership, I don't think is going to change the events, but I would assume that it brings more dollars into the university since they are the ones who can control that revenue now.
One thing we did not find out in the interview, by the way, let's stroke our own ego here at the Daily Memphian because a great job reporting by Sam Hardiman, who broke the story, the Daily Memphian Enterprise and investigative reporter. And I know, Frank, I think you spoke with Laird Veach that it is not 100% sure at this time that it will be on time to start the refurbishment of the stadium. They're hoping right after the AutoZone Liberty Bowl game, but it's not yet 100% positive that that will happen. Correct?
Oh well, Sam Hardiman had
that interview.
The interview with Laird Beach, and so he had that conversation. But from my understanding, that when this news originally came out, I was under the impression that everything was guaranteed 100% to go. There's still some workings. I think the big part of this is that can't be forgotten is they got the 170. $50 million still has to be raised by the university to reach that 220. And so I think that still has to, those wheels still need to work.
That'll be a challenge, Tim. It's not real easy. They do a great job in fundraising at the university, but to all of a sudden come up with $50 million, that's not a drop in the bucket.
It's not, but I bet some of that money, well, I wouldn't bet much because I don't have much to bet, but I bet some of that money is already in place, just kind of sitting there because they've been doing a little bit of fundraising. At one point I heard they were at around 20 million, maybe more than that. So maybe some of that's in place. And Frank brought this point up earlier when he and I were just talking. Maybe it spurs some donors who were reluctant to, pitch in toward all of this when the stadium was under the city's control, will now be prompted to do it because they feel like more like they're given to the university as opposed to given to the city. So that might free up some money. And to go back on your earlier point about the other events, including the Liberty Bowl. Look, the Liberty Bowl has to be thrilled with all of this because their worst case scenario would be if, and not that this was close to happening, in the last few years or whatever, but their worst case scenario would have been if the Liberty Bowl gets imploded and Memphis built an on-campus stadium because all of a sudden they have a 40,000 seat bowl game at the end of December instead of a almost 60,000 seat stadium. And that changes dynamics for bowl incredibly. The showboats got to be totally on board with all of this, you would think, because Fred Smith was instrumental in the showboats coming here. Let's not forget.
Right.
They did. He was up on stage reluctantly, but he was up on stage with the mayor and the commissioner and all the other muckety mucks posing for photos when he got dragged up out of the crowd. He had a heavy hand in the showboats and in the negotiations with Fox and everything to get them here. So they got to be totally on board.
I think Skipper the mascot would have been a part of it, but he hadn't been created yet. He would have been up there with Fred Smith. One more question on this topic, and then we'll move on to the actual game that the Tigers played against SMU and the game they'll play on Friday at Temple. Does this mean anything as far as, because everybody's going to talk about it, helping the Tigers get into a Power 5 conference one day when there's more realignment? Tim, let me start with you.
Well, first of all, I did appreciate your Skipper reference.
Thank you very much.
Not going to skip that at all. Look, they have so many other issues preventing them from getting into the Power 5 conference right now. Does this get them over the hump? It's one of those, it can't hurt things. When they originally were making their most recent pitch to get into the Big 12, they had, the money coming from the state and all the promises and everything. They didn't have nearly as much in hand. That might have helped a little bit then. I don't think it would have been enough. You've still got the comparatives that you have to deal with, the other teams that did get in. You have the city issues, the city reputation to get in. You have the money issue in terms of NIL funding and all of that. There's so many different components of it. Does it move the needle all the way in and of itself? No. Does it push it a little bit, in the Tigers' favor? Maybe looking at the broader picture, you would think at least a little, if not a smidge more.
Yeah, Frank, as you said to me before we began this podcast, it can't hurt.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think at this point, no matter how much it does or doesn't move the needle, it definitely doesn't bring it negative. Like, it can only be a positive in doing these things. And I think Memphis is at a point where whatever incremental things that they can create to create more noise around conference realignment, they have to do it. And this is one of those things, just to put together a complete package of incremental success may be enough to move the needle as a whole, as opposed to just trying to look at it in a vacuum.
Just real quick, if I could interject, Greg, just gut feeling, the next one to go, the next Pac-12-like implosion is probably going to be the ACC. And if they lose if they lose only a couple, an FSU or Clemson, maybe to the SEC, this maybe better positions Memphis for making that jump.
Yeah.
But if they have the all the way, lose all but two teams implosion, then Memphis is really in a world of hurt, because even, $220 million in stadium renovation isn't going to get yourself probably into what at that point are only 3 power conferences, with a lot of the other ACC teams being absorbed by either the Big Ten or the Big 12.
Yeah, well said. From the world of good timing, this story comes out with a lot of good news. Saturday passed, unfortunately, not good news. Once again, the Tigers with an opportunity, Frank, a golden opportunity. They don't beat SMU. SMU wins 38-34. That means Memphis can't go to the conference championship game, and I know that was the goal at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that is a deflating loss in terms of what that means for what this season could have been. Obviously, there are things out there they can still chase, 10-win seasons and all that, but the bottom line was to win a conference championship, and you had 2 cracks at beating 2 of the teams preseason ranked in the top 4, and you couldn't get it done, and that's what ultimately was the nail in the coffin for Memphis.
Yeah, Frank, it's a deflating loss because you do have a polarizing subject in the head coach, Ryan Silverfield, who gets a lot of support. As Frank said, they could still win 10 games. It's happened only 3 times in the history of the school as far as the football program is concerned. Yet there are others that say, all right, they won the 8 games they're supposed to win, and a couple they barely won, and the 3 that they were underdogs, they couldn't come through and get dubs. So it's a little bit overshadowed, the 8, 9, the 9, 10 wins, whatever it ends up being, if they get there. If they lose to Temple, then Katie bar the door. But you're looking at 9, 10 if they win the bowl game. But some people say, who cares?
Which is crazy, because like you're talking 9, 10 win seasons. Like, that's not easy to do.
Right.
In college football. But like I wrote about the other day, they're totally caught in no man's land. Their best scenario would be you win 2 games next season and you move on. Or you go put yourself in a New Year's Six bowl. You have incredible excitement around the program. You give them a substantive contract extension. He magically gets more engaging in press conferences and dealing with fans, and develops the kind of personality that fans can latch on to. He kind of shakes the whole Josh Pastner great guy but syndrome, and maybe does that 2 years in a row, and everybody loves it. But right now you're in this like in between area where it's like you're winning 9, 10 games potentially, and there's still people going, it's crazy.
8, 9, 10 wins. The fact is, and I think we can all agree on this, they're not making a coaching change. For people who want a coaching change, that ain't happening. However, with a team that struggled defensively, there may be an outcry for some changes. Frank, do you believe that there could be a change? And I'm a real proponent and a real supporter of Matt Barnes. The defense has been, unfortunately, the bugaboo for this team. Do you think there could be a move or two?
I don't know, man, because if you're looking at the 2-year tenure as a whole with Barnes, last year we were talking about the defense as being one of the strengths of the team, right? And so you have, I think last year earns him another year.
So you think one good year adds on another year? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. So he had one good year. He had 1 year where they struggled. I don't know if you move on after one struggling year after, last season. Because last season the offense struggled. And so, and then now this year they were the bright spot of the team. And so I do think that he's and in that team loves him. That locker room, you talk to those defensive guys, they love him. They run through a brick wall for him. And I know that's all cliche stuff, but I do think in terms of coaching changes, that does mean something.
He's also a really stand-up guy. He takes the blame for just about everything. He deflects it off his players. But Tim, let me ask you this. In this day and age of the transfer portal, how pivotal is it to have the coach is signed for 4 years type stuff? Does it really matter right now that you're showcasing a coach, and I'm not sure what Ryan has left, and if you even need to add years, but do you really have to do it in this day and age?
Well, half as much as it used to, it means, and maybe even less than that.
Right.
I mean, you're still, the base of your program are still the high school kids who, in an ideal scenario, you're going to have around for 4 or 5 years. Even if there is, attrition in that class, you still end up with 25% of them around in 4 years. But yeah, absolutely, the portal's changed the dynamics, and it's changed the kids who are the high school kids. Like, they're not just recruited by the Ryan Silverfields of the world. They're recruited by their position coaches and their coordinators. I mean, that's a part of it, and so all that whole dynamic gets changed as well. The thing with coordinators that you brought up earlier with Frank, and I have no clue what's going to happen one way or the other, either at the end of the regular season or, toward the bowl game. I mean, coaches jump around as much as these kids all the day. If there's an opportunity, who knows if, one of them might take it and run. But coordinators are the first fall guy. Like any head coach who's on the hot seat typically buys himself another year by getting rid of one or both of his coordinators, even if they're like the greatest guy in the world. Heck, I watched Louisiana hire its coordinator after the third game of the season. A couple coordinators later, Mark Hudspeth brought in the guy who was like his mentor, the guy who coached him in college, the guy who, he was as close with as maybe anybody else in the coaching industry, Melvin Smith. And he got fired by Hudspeth. So, I mean, that kind of stuff happens all the time. Coordinators must have like some sort of support group where they just all go out and meet a couple times a year. And they're like, why in the world did we pick this business where we know we're getting hired to be fired? And like, what do we do to deal with it? Because it happens to almost all of them.
It happens to just about every coach.
Do you think it matters about the fact that the program's only 2 years removed from losing both of its coordinators in McIntyre and Johns? 2 years later, do you want to make another coordinator switch? Like, I don't.
A lot of times it's if the fan base is vocal about something, they want a change. The head coach is not. And there are people, I'm telling you, there are people out there, despite what could be 9 wins or 10 wins, minimum 8 wins, that still don't believe Ryan Silverfield is the right guy. So if they're barking and they're barking loud enough, and you look at the season and go, wait a minute, that schedule, bare minimum is 8 wins, and they're at 8 wins. So there's going to be people that say, well, what are you going to do? You're not going to make any changes with that defense, with what they did? I'm just telling you what the people are saying on my radio show.
And Frank, bear this in mind. I'm not saying either one way or the other what should or shouldn't happen. It's a what have you done for me lately world, and that's amplified by 10 in things like college football.
Which is true. And I think this conversation would probably be more suited if it was another 7-win season or whatever. I just don't know if after a potentially 10-win season,
did any move should be made?
Do you pull the trigger on whether you think they should or not or whatever? I don't think the trigger will be pulled after a 10-win season.
That's fair enough. That's fair. I'm telling you, you can argue both sides, and I've heard the argument from both sides. As far as the game is concerned, Frank, what's interesting is I thought the Tigers played one of their better all-around games, but they made enough mistakes to lose the game. The fumble by Blankensee on that first drive, they were trying to set the tone. They were able to cash in for a touchdown. And then obviously that drive when they were down 3, when they committed 3 crucial penalties. They looked like they were in field goal territory. They were about at the 25-yard line when they got called for an illegal man downfield. That series of mistakes cost them. And then when you're playing a team like SMU that is a really solid team, you have to force them into some mistakes. They didn't make any. So as close as that game was, and I thought it was going to be close, and even though there were defensive lapses, because there have been in every game, it wasn't a complete abomination. The defense did step up and play some series really well. Other series, they got burned, and unfortunately, Memphis made enough mistakes to lose that football game.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation going into it was, I think we kind of knew if Memphis wanted to win the game, they had to force at least a turnover or two.
Exactly.
And they didn't. They didn't get that done because just going toe-to-toe, head-to-head with that SMU offense, and like you said, there were a lot of series where the defense did play well. They forced some punts and so on. But in order to change the game into a winning favor, there needed to be a turnover, especially if the offense turned the ball over in the beginning of the game like Blankenship. Now, to their credit, though, they did bounce back from that turnover. Like, that turnover didn't derail the rest of the game. They figured that out, but still just wasn't enough.
Tim, what did you think about the performance?
Well, the one drive with the 3 passes and the short touchdown run, that was ridiculous. Not taking advantage of the goofy quarterback pooch punt that went like 10 yards.
Mm-hmm.
That hurt them. The 3 penalties in a row, that seemed to deflate them. Despite all of that, it was still there for the having. But everything had to go perfectly for Memphis, and it just didn't.
So, Frank, Temple on Friday to wrap up the regular season to try to get win number 9. It's never easy against Temple. Last year was a battle here in Memphis, although defensively they did a good job in stymieing the Owls. They do have a prolific quarterback in E.J. Warner, the son of the former Rams star Hall of Famer Kurt Warner. Memphis has lost 3 straight in Philly. They've only won 1 time in Philly. They're playing at the Link, home of the Philadelphia Eagles. Emotionally, where do you think the Tigers are to be up for this game to try to get that dub?
You know, obviously it's deflating to realize that you're out of the conference championship race. But talking to the coaches and the players, they seem still motivated and focused to chase a quality bowl, even though it isn't the championship. Like we said, you're still chasing 10-win seasons, and so there's still enough tangible stuff that is in their grasp as what you would call maybe a consolation prize, to where nobody's going to quit on the locker room heading into that Temple game.
Temple, Tim, they don't have much to play for. They're a 3-win team, but they certainly get up for Memphis and Philly for whatever the reason is. Do you think it's going to be a battle?
Yeah, I really don't care about any of that. What I care about is where you're going to tell Frank to go for lunch in Philly. Like, which cheesesteak place?
Well, we're stuck. We're stuck, as you know, because it's Thanksgiving Day that we're traveling. He's traveling in on his own. I'm traveling in with the team, and there ain't nothing open. If you don't go to the hotel or a couple of restaurants that's serving turkey, that's it. There's nothing else. You can't get your your cheesesteak. Cheesecake.
Jim's, yeah, I bet Jim's has got to be open on.
No way on Thanksgiving Day.
Well, I mean, the game's on Friday, so you might be able to get one on Friday.
Except that the game is at 12 noon, and if you want to go over, I don't even know if they'll open at like 10 a.m.
No, I'm just talking about after. Well, okay, you guys are hopping.
We're done.
Yeah, you're done.
Yeah, we're on the plane and we're flying
those
back.
Places, I've had a Philly cheesesteak sitting under the interstate overpass at like 1 a.m. in Philly. You can get a Philly any time of the night or day.
I don't know about the holiday. I think even the hobos take off the holiday. They take off Thanksgiving, so it's going to be tough. But listen, the Tigers with a win gets them the 9. And then real quick, guys, a thought on the bowl. Is it too early to think what bowl, Frank, that they may be going to? I know there's a lot of rumors out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumors, and obviously the Liberty Bowl is in one of those rumors. As far as the Liberty Bowl is concerned, you got to wait to see how the SEC plays out, right? Is South Carolina going to beat Clemson to get bowl eligible? Is Florida going to beat Florida State now that Florida State has an injured quarterback? Those things kind of have to shake out before you decide whether Memphis is going to be in contention for like a Liberty Bowl or something like that. But Military Bowl, Liberty Bowl, Fenway Bowl is kind of where the rumors are.
Final word, Mr. Buckley.
Boston in December is beautiful. Memphis in December, bizarrely, is always just like a total mess. And I'm wondering if there's like a turkey bowl, because I'm having turkey for lunch. I put away my lunch to do this. I'm having turkey for lunch right now because I'm practicing for Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be the Fenway because I think it's going to be the loser of the American Conference Championship game, assuming that the American Conference champion winner goes to the New Year's Six, which would be the Fiesta Bowl. By the way, I had a turkey sandwich today as well. So that'll do it for us for this week. Want to thank Tim Buckley. Want to thank Frank Bonner. Next week, again, the full panel, if you will. Parth Upajai, who's in the Bahamas with the Memphis Tigers men's basketball team. He will join us to talk hoops, but we will all be here gathered again to recap what's happening in football, talk about the possibilities for the bowl season as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
You too. And shame on the Daily Memphian for forcing Parth against his will to spend time in the Bahamas.
Poor guy.
I feel for him.
Poor guy. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
No, you're not going to the Hawaii Bowl, Frank. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Natalie.
We'll talk to you guys next week.